At ProQuest Plus in Hiroshima, Brodie Spurlock took the objectively correct hero to play in any tournament. He won the entire event through a field of KOs, Auroras, and Data Dolls, even without the help of Art of War. Let's hear about his story and his deck. Bienvenue, my Brodie Spurlock fans, because we've got Brodie Spurlock in the house who has been converted fully over. He played Levia at ProQuest Plus at the Battle-Hardened Hiroshima last weekend, and he won the entire thing. Now, this is kind of crazy because there's not so much information about this event. I only saw this one Twitter post that said there was a Levia in top 8, didn't even know who it was, and then lo and behold, it was you, Brodie. It was you, and you won the whole thing. So thanks for joining me. I'm sure the entire League audience is freaking out right now. So what really takes me back, right? Like, what's so surprising is that I had no idea you had a history with Levia at all. So what is that story?
Okay, well, first of all, hi everyone. Hi Ethan, thanks for having me on. Yeah. Original history with Levia is just learning how to pronounce the hero's name correctly.
There you go.
As you know, I used to be very incorrect on this matter. I would say Levia until I was forcibly corrected many times in a row on the Battle-Hardened Cincinnati stream last year, thanks to Ethan. And now it's been drilled into my mind that Levia is
buddy.
wrong, and
yeah, there you go.
Levia is the one and only way to pronounce this hero's name. So I'll never get that wrong again. And then as far as actually playing the hero, I haven't really played Brutes ever. I've never taken them to a CC or Blitz tournament before. I went into the format knowing that like Levia was probably one of the top decks, and maybe KO also was. I didn't have a bunch of Blitz experience, but when I was testing her, I found that I actually really enjoy playing Levia. I feel like you have interesting decision spots that come up that are like pretty unique from all the other heroes.
You're on a slippery slope. This is how it starts, buddy. Just warning you. Just warning you.
Yeah, it's quite fun managing the graveyard and banish zone and like thinking about. I feel like there are more like little aspects of a turn that you have to balance on pretty much every turn than like a lot of other heroes have going on.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, all that to say, I'm pretty brand new to Levia, but I am a fan.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, the intricacies of Levia, is really what drags you down into never really being able to call any Levia game you ever play quite perfect, because the decisions are so they can get so nitty gritty. But of course, it takes a lot of perfect decisions to have actually won the entire event. So fresh or not, Brodie, you are now in the halls of the League of Levia history books, one of only, I believe, 3 people who have ever won a PTI. So huge congrats. Like literally you are one of the very few who've done it. For this event, you kind of mentioned like you hadn't played much Blitz. I don't think a lot of people were really focusing on Blitz at this moment in time because, you know, World Championships are going on. That's a lot of limited, it's a lot of constructed. You're in the Team Cup, which is a lot of living legend. But when you had to approach Blitz, like what was your analysis of where that format stood?
I think the last time I really worked on the format was in April this year. But so this time I went in with some like prior knowledge, honestly, mostly from that April period when like Victor was kind of top dog and you know, some other decks as well. But I feel like the Zen period was just completely overtaken by Zen, so there actually wasn't much learning from that. But I was in Japan. I was talking with my new friend Xavier McLean, great guy. I met him during this trip, and we actually played, I think, 4 times across the 2 weekends, which is kind of crazy. He fatigued me 3 times, and then I finally got my revenge in Blitz. But anyway, I went to him first for not only advice about the format, but also cards. He lent me the whole Levia deck, so I just want to give a little bit of a shout out there. This would not have been possible without his cards. But basically, in my mind, there were like 6 to 10 like kind of top decks going in, which are like Victor, Blaze, Levia, Vincent, Enigma, one of the 2 Enigmas, maybe both, I wasn't really sure. And then you've also got like Rune Blades. Aurora and Florian seem solid, new heroes, so I didn't really know what they looked like in Blitz. KO is like gotta be solid, and then I feel like I'm forgetting one big one.
You're forgetting Data Doll, right? Data Doll.
Of course,
that's like the big one. They even caught some bans yesterday. From all I knew about the format looking in was basically what content had been made, and We Make Best did a stream with Data Doll showing off some of the most degenerate, like beyond Starvo level turns you've ever seen. So that one to me felt like top dog, but of course it's we make best. Maybe it's just like flashy because it's them playing on Talishar. Did you consider her like actually part of this metagame?
Yeah, 100%. That was the big one.
Okay, that was the big one.
I think it's quite possible that Datadol was the objective best hero in the format. Turns out there were 0 victors at the tournament, so it would have been fine. That was a bit strange to me. I think he is one of the top decks, but people just played with whatever cards they had, right? Like most people were there for Worlds. They didn't have Victor cards.
And they're definitely not playing Victor in CC, right? So poor guy.
With Victor. Yeah, I think that mech is definitely extremely good. I think the biggest concern there is you have to have some plan for fatigue. But all in all, I just went with Levia because I really like decks that don't have any auto losses. Or like whatever their worst matchup is, it feels like the most close to even. I just want to be like 50% across the board. And I felt like, Levia has this reputation that she can lose to herself, but it didn't feel like there was any one hero that was really a counter to her. So I just wanted something that was like kind of robust and rock solid.
Oh, definitely. That's generally when I go into an event, my biggest fear is my own deck not cooperating rather than any matchup you can get from the, gem lottery bag. So it's still something you have to stomach, and not every player is going to feel comfortable with that. But that is a unique spot for this hero to be, where you have game. A lot of it's off the back of some dumb things you can do because you have Blood Rush Bellows in your deck. A lot is because you can stabilize with the incredible armor that you have. And of course, a lot of it is because when you play this deck really well and really tight, it does just overperform than that first time you try to sit down and play Levia. It's a night and day difference in power level. I think it's time we reveal the deck itself, because Blitz has been in a weird spot. Well, like Levia and Blitz has been in a weird spot where once Zen rotated, she definitely felt like one of the strongest decks in Blitz. I was blown away by how games just were so heavily favored just because I could do so much damage so quickly, and because armor is a larger percentage of your life, you kind of just get to ignore anything your opponent did. Like all this was condensed into a game plan that felt pretty insane for Blitz. But that was with Art of War. Once Art of War was banned, there wasn't much exploration with the format because there just weren't that many events, and that's kind of where it ended for me. So I have been missing a post Art of War Levia Blitz deck to really dig into until now. So talk to me a little bit about how you built this deck, because yes, you borrowed the cards from Xavier, but who actually came up with the deck list we're seeing?
The first thing I did when I was working on Levia was I went to the League of Levia Discord, which I have been hibernating in for a couple years, an honorary member up until now. And I went to basically the most recent Blitz deck that you posted that had, I think I had won a tournament in Japan. And that's where I started. And that deck had originally was still playing Slithering Shadowpede, which I ended up deciding that I didn't think that card was good enough with Art of War gone. Obviously, it was insane when paired with Art of War. But yeah, that was kind of the shell I started with, and then I started tweaking things, kept what worked for me, cut some cards I didn't like. But that was a great starting shell just to start jamming games. I had no idea really where to start with this hero. I also looked at the most recent CC list you posted, and this is mostly just kind of a mash together of the two. The thing that actually ended up being the hardest for me was the blues. I felt like it was not, I wouldn't say easy, but easier to decide which reds and yellows made sense. And then I got to some of these last blue slots, and I had no idea, like the one Smashback Alehorn. I ended up liking the barraging beatdowns quite a bit, but it took me a hot minute to even try them. One reckless swing versus 0 or 2. These are things I'm still unsure of, but for the most part, I like where these blues ended up.
Sweet. So let's actually break down the list a little bit top to bottom, because there isn't that much Blitz Levia content, and what better than to look at a deck and really dig in that actually won a PTI, right? So you say you've got all these influences coming in from the red base, and sure enough, like you're not taking too many strays from the norm in what's represented here, but sometimes there are extra reds that come through alongside the Blood Debt suite, alongside the Draw Discard suite, like Command and Conquer, or in the Japan deck list you're referencing, 10 foot tall and bulletproof. So what kind of was the line where you decided what red made the cut versus what was not?
So I'll talk about both of those cards. 10 foot especially is a really fun one. So starting with CNC, I think in Blitz, most of the good decks have so much armor that on hits like that are a fair bit less important. Like CNC and Send Packing, let's say you're in a Levia mirror, they just throw their husk at that and move on with their life. And both of those cards are giving up some power in order to have the on hit. Like Send Packing is a 3 for 6, not a 2 for 6. CNC, of course, isn't a brute card. They're both just like suboptimal cards for the benefit of destroying an arsenal. So yeah, I think in the Blitz format, those cards are just less powerful. And then 10 foot tall is one that I did play with a lot. And there was a Blitz Super Armory this weekend in Hiroshima. And I was playing one copy of 10 foot tall at that. And it was a lot of fun. Yeah. It created this mini game, of course, of like trying to transform on the turn you play it, or having to hold it basically until the game is ending to try to avoid the -2 intellect. When I first saw it in the list, I didn't know the interaction with Plasma Fet. I had no idea it worked that way, to be honest. And when I found that out, I thought it was very cool. It gives your hero -2 intellect, and by the end of the turn,
you are not that hero. Correct.
It's a really fun card, and I was kind of disappointed to end up not playing it, but I think I don't regret cutting it, because basically it felt like it introduced this like pretty serious minigame where I felt like I was warping normally like kind of 2 turn cycles around trying to get the 10 foot tall off. And I felt like there were already too many other little mini games going on with Levia. Like, you have these no blocks that kind of force you to play your turn a certain way. Like when you draw Wild Ride, you have to either play or arsenal the Wild Ride, or same thing with pulping. There are like awkward spots where you draw Wild Ride and Blood Rush Bellow, and you're like, well, I want to arsenal the Blood Rush Bellow, but I virtually can't without like basically IPing a card because of this Wild Ride. Sometimes, you have to get your Blood Dead off in order to set up the like flip consumed thing with 10 foot tall. You basically need there are like ways to get around this, but you basically need one turn where you get some number of cards with Blood Debt into your Banished Zone, and then you need another turn to actually take Blood Debt from them, because normally when they're put in there, by doing that, you're turning Blood Debt off.
Of course, yeah.
That requiring 2 turn cycles basically just ends up being a bit clunky in Blitz. I feel like it's difficult to always pull it off. So yeah, for a lot of reasons, I think 10 foot tall ends up being a bit too clunky to include, but it's a really cool card.
But then we move to the yellows, which have some interesting choices. This is where you start to see some of the unique spice that you did add, especially in lieu of Art of War being a card available to us in the format anymore. So the main thing that I think draws most people's eye is going to be Deep-Rooted Evil, because from the surface in, people see it and say, oh, well, it cost me 3. That's an entire card. But what they don't see is the larger picture of actually making that work. It is unique to see in Blitz, actually, though, because it is generally like a longer game plan card to try to milk it for value over the course of a game. So why did you arrive on including Deep-Rooted Evil over any other recursion piece?
I think if Call to the Grave was not on the list, or had not been printed, it's possible that Deep-Rooted Evil wouldn't make sense. But I basically found that like whenever I had Call to the Grave on turn 0, or like just generically early in the game, I just want to go get some 6 in graveyard fill, that I pretty much would always grab the Deep-Rooted Evil, because it has the most upside, just like getting it in there early, getting it into the Banished Zone. Maybe I find a spot later to play it. I think during the PQ Plus, I ended up playing Deep-Rooted Evil one time for my Banished Zone, which honestly across 8, I think it was 9 rounds, across 9 rounds is like pretty solid. It's
You think that's pretty solid? You played it once in 9 games?
I'm not sure. I would want to play with it more, but currently if I had to run the list back, I would still keep the 1.
Okay, so with Call to the Grave accessing this toolbox of recursion pieces, basically, highest impact tends to be a little bit matchup dependent. So that might be a difference when you actually go to CC. You can craft a little bit more what that role should be, but it makes sense the way you're presenting it. For Blitz, you don't really have that room, so you do the one thing that is the most consistent: send a 6 to your graveyard. And if you play it, you play it. If you don't, maybe it helped you trigger a Shadow Realm Horror or something. So why not? The rest of the yellows make a lot of sense. Agile windup, like you already mentioned, especially with turn 0 and turn 1, the ability to just feel so ahead off the back of this kind of card, especially in Blitz. Very high impact. Beast Within, Blood Rush Bellow, Graveling Growl, Hungering Slaughter Beast, and Mark the Beast, all not too spicy in your yellow slots. Is there a card that stands out to you that you think overperformed?
I would say Mark of the Beast is, obviously Blood Rush Bellow is the best yellow, but Mark of the Beast is like perhaps my kind of favorite of this bunch. The list that I started with only had 1 copy, and I ended up really liking 2 and feeling like I'd probably play more if I could. I think in CC, perhaps this card has more of a cost because banishing it early in the game ends up just potentially like leaking you some damage and, you know, forcing you to start to play in a way where you want to like turn Blooded off earlier than you want to go down that route. But in Blitz, the games are so fast that there's less cost to that, and you end up just like, you know, getting into the banish and turn off your Blood cycle faster anyway. Mm-hmm. But I think having this card as an emergency, like I drew this and now I don't have to worry about turning off my 3/4 Blood Debt is worth the cost of, you know, turn 1 I drew this and now I'm going to have 1 Blood Debt for the rest of the game. I think it's really strong.
But that's a huge difference that you point out. In Blitz is a much more condensed game. And sometimes there's just not enough time, period, to get many cards in your banish zone. So to know that even blocking with Mark of the Beast, even discarding it, means it is there where you are kind of struggling to fill anyway because of the condensed timeline of a Blitz game, definitely makes a lot of sense. I'm glad you pointed out this being so much stronger in that format alone. So now we look at the blues in the list, and it's actually really cool to hear your story of struggling so much to find these slots, because I think what you ended up on is basically perfect for Blitz. A lot of what you consider with her blues and CC have to do with second cycle and some considerations over a longer game. But in Blitz, you want every card you see, especially on turn 0, to be as high impact to the game as possible. And what that means for Levia a lot of the time is just playing a freaking card. Like, just let me get something to graveyard. And so even you recognize that and moved these extra 0 costs with Smashback Alehorn, Barraging Beatdown, and of course Call to the Grave as your core with the filler blue 6s on the outside. There is one blue that is missing though, and it's always one that in Blitz can feel so good or also feel like the worst card in your deck. And when there's no victors in the room, like you said, you were actually quite smart to have omitted it, but that is Doomsday. Where the heck is Doomsday?
I'm just gonna admit ignorance on this one, and I'll say I did look at that card and I was like, I've never played Levia before. I have no idea how to execute like long game plans in her. I've seen some of it on stream or, you know, whatever. I could like figure it out in theory, but basically I just had no idea like what I was gonna do with Doomsday if I put it in my deck. I thought if I put it in, I probably would want to devote a sideboard slot to it, because like a no block that you can't clear from your hand maybe isn't good enough to play in like the other matchups. So I just decided not to play it, but it's very possible that it is an important card that should be in the list.
Sag Brodie, if you'd played it, I was gonna ship it out to wherever you are next week, Florence or whatever. One of the brand new cold foil Blasphemfet holiday themed tokens, which you can get on the Patreon right now. But for you, Brodie, you don't get one. You don't. Even if you sign up, I'm gonna blacklist your name. But that's interesting. That's interesting. I think most people look at Doomsday and just very obviously decide this card is probably a 1-card 12 at minimum. Right? Summons a 6 HP dude that can swing. But you're right, there is more of a game plan that you do need to pull off to execute it. 6 Blood Debt is just hard to get to.
Honestly, probably want to play it as a sideboard card because a no block with no upside in those matchups is probably expensive enough to warrant the slot. But yeah, I think getting it into the 52, especially after hearing everything you're saying, sounds like it probably is going to be correct.
But I wanna mention here, you're running one of my favorite cards in Levia. Why wouldn't you, right? Call to the Grave, fantastic. But I keep hearing from a friend of yours, Mr. Michael Hamilton, that this card is just bad. but I don't know if he's saying it in the context of like Levia or just like the game in general, because as a Levia player, this card is everything I want other than like, you know, Codex of Frailty levels. It could have made us a Ponder or something, like, come on. But it is still so insanely good at basically acting as a 6 in our arsenal. It's a burnable 0-cost blue. It can turn off Blood Debt with Beast Within. This card, it fetches Deeper to Evil, right? It does so much of what I want out of the deck. And it is also introducing a lot of people to Levia first come, first serve. There's someone who won a ProQuest this last season who only touched the deck because Call to the Grave finally made her smooth enough that he wanted to play it. So what is your opinion?
So I will start by saying that I respect Michael Hamilton's opinions a lot, and I think probably what he's saying is that in general, on a non-turn 0 turn, playing this card just to put it and another card in the graveyard, especially if you're not getting Beast Within, is just it functionally like, you know, burning a card from your hand, getting no value from it. So in the general context of Flesh and Blood, I think that makes sense. With that said, I think this card is a banger and gets 2 thumbs up in Levia.
Perfect. That's all we needed to hear. So with that, I want to scooch on over. You mentioned the sideboard, but I guess talk us through how you landed on these inventory pieces in particular, especially now since you can add more cards than just equipment to begin with.
Yeah, so the main 6 equipment are pretty standard. These ones are pretty much all like anti-blaze cards.
Yep.
Savage Sash is applicable in more matchups. I played against Arachne Solitary Confinement, where I think this card makes sense. They have so many attack reacts that can like surprise you down below 13, and you don't know when their attacks are going to be for 6. So I think Sash makes a lot of sense. Aurora was also reasonably popular at the event, and I think Sash makes sense into her for some of the same reasons. They have like shenanigans like Lightning Press, and also they don't like reliably attack with cards for more than 4. Like, it's possible that their first couple of turns are just going to be like 4/2/4, whatever, and Husk can be a little bit clunky. And I think that like Sash and Husk are close enough in power level that in matchups like that I would rather just play Sash. That's my current opinion. And then of course into Blaze, Husk does nothing, so this card is great. The rest of the stuff is pretty much only for Wizard.
Yeah, holy moly.
I think Soulhorn is amazing. Besides having Arcane Barrier 2 being the only card that has that, I actually ended up using the ability on it as well because it's so hard to get Graveyard Fill versus Wizard. There's a couple things I want to touch on with these last 4 cards. Let me just start with Levia Redeemed, because I have a very surprising statistic to share from ProQuest Plus, which is that I never transformed.
To even Blasmo?
To either one, yeah.
Oh my! Whoa, that caught me off guard, folks. You even weaved in so much within our conversation so far of considerations about Plasma Fet.
Yeah, so I was quite surprised by this. I did transform several times in testing games, and at least once, maybe twice, at least once in the Super Armory, which was only 3 rounds. But yeah, in the ProQuest Plus, it never ended up happening. I think part of that was cutting 10 foot tall from the deck. I think I was warping my turn cycles to try really, really hard to transform anytime I drew 10 foot tall. But in the end, basically, the Blitz games were so fast that most of the time, if I was going to try to warp my turn to transform to Blasmafet, I was only going to have normally like 1 Mark of the Beast that I could play, or maybe sometimes 2 cards, but like usually never more than that. And of course, the Blitz games are so short that is 1 or 2 free cards is a whole lot of value. And so I don't mean to say that makes it not worth it, I guess, but basically like the window that you have once there is like a good enough card, or especially like 2 cards. 2 is where I feel like it's probably like becomes really worth transforming and trying to change the way you're playing the game. The window, once that happens, before it's just like impossible for you to stay above 13, or even you're pretty much dying, is narrow enough that I feel like it's often hard to transform. I think there's no way that the Demi-Hero should be cut from the deck or anything, but basically I think that it's actually just a bit hard to play toward it in this format, and it ended up being less impressive they're less important than I expected.
Well, it's interesting because I'm coming from basically only reps with Levia in Blitz with Art of War. And I think that might have been a difference maker card as well in just letting you, hey, it's turn 1. I'm going to just banish this Hungering or whatever's in my hand. It digs you through the deck, but then it also critically would get you a card in Banish before you really had Graveyard set up. Because that's what's kind of so hard to do in Blitz is the condensed, I need a Graveyard, I need to banish, I need to then not turn off Blood Debt. You're already at this point counting like 3 turn cycles where you only start at 20. So unless you sack all your armor incredibly early, you just fly past that life total so quickly. So that's incredible that you never flipped. Did you ever get close then to redeemed at all? Because 13 is also very hard for Blitz.
It's something I was paying attention to, like the whole week of testing and the tournament and stuff, like thinking about the possibility of redeemed. And I think it's possible that in like a long game like Victor, or maybe even like, I dare say certain Florian games, but don't quote me on that, I don't know, that this could happen. But no, I never got past like probably even 6 or 7 Blood Debt.
Wild. Okay, well, as skirmish season unfolds, I'd love to hear in the comments, people, how you end up using the Demi Hero, because maybe I'm too warped by it, because heck, I haven't won a ProQuest Plus, and I definitely do try to play around the Demi Hero at all times, even in Blitz. So then the rest of your sideboard, you do have completely dedicated to the Wizard matchup. Is there anything you would want to change? Kind of what you talked about, maybe a Doomsday slot? Did Arcane Lantern feel warranted over losing Double Claw? Like what would you edit going forward?
I think there are 2 main slots that I would want to change. One is in the deck, but we'll start with Arcane Lantern. I played this card obviously into the Blaze, and if I remember correctly, okay, so I remember now. I played against, I think, 3 heroes in the tournament represented Arcane Lantern. One was Blaze, where if this is in my deck, of course I'm going to play it. Mm-hmm. One was Vinset, where I decided to play it, and I like having AB1 versus Vinset, mm-hmm. but I don't know if it was worth it in that matchup. And one was Aurora, where I mistakenly presented this and deeply regretted it. At the going into that match, I had felt like I was rarely swinging in the second claw, and I didn't think it was that important. And I think twice in that game, I had to warp my turn differently because I did not have a second Mandible Claw. I really wanted one. One of them was a Blood Rush turn, of course. Thankfully, I still won that game, but I think that was a big mistake to play into Aurora. And in general, by the end of the day, I just was pretty impressed with the second Mandible Claw, and I felt like even into Blaze, I'm not sure if this is a card I want at all. I'm still torn on that, and I think it for anyone that's going to play the deck, I would probably test with and without. But at the moment, I think I would just cut the Arcane Lantern and replace either the Grasp or the Dance with an extra AB1. So probably, I think it depends if you decide you want to play. If you decide you want to play the Null Rune into Vinset, then you would like cut the worst slot. But I suspect into Rune Blades, you just jam 0 AB and race them and play your good armor. In which case, it probably wouldn't matter which one you cut. And then spend that inventory slot on the Doomsday that Ethan is saying that you want to have in case your tournament has greater than 0 victories at it. And then the last slot is in the main deck. One card that I was testing with, pretty much purely for Call to the Grave, but also has crazy applications if you randomly hit it off Beast Within, is Blue Back Alley Breakline.
Oh, baby. The spice that didn't make it isn't surface level. The spice that didn't make it is the deep stuff, like Blue Back Alley, 10 foot tall. Like the stuff that was on the cusp of this list is wild because you're not saying like, oh, Mutated Mass. You're going quite a few steps deeper. So why Back Alley then?
Basically, it's there are spots where you mostly late in the game, I think, and mostly in favorable board states, you end up with like a full hand where you don't want to roll scabs because you're like so far ahead in the game. By the way, quick tangent, kind of similar to Never Transforming. One thing that I just wanted to mention is during the whole tournament, I only rolled scabs one time, which which was also surprising to me.
Mhm.
But I kind of found that maybe it was just because Levia ended up being quite a strong hero, but I view scabs mostly as like a catch-up mechanic in losing board states to just introduce variance to maybe draw you back in. But basically, I was just doing well enough in all of my games and like in a good enough spot to win, and my hands played well enough that I felt like I never like needed this card. There's honestly quite a bit of go again in the card pool, so that's one thing I would have mentioned.
Mhm.
But anyway, yeah, with back alley, you basically enter these spots where you're likely to win the game, and it doesn't make sense to roll scabs. Like in the when this came up in the tournament, I never rolled scabs in these spots, but I had Call of the Grave in my hand, and I basically had like a 5-card hand where I could go Call of the Grave, fetch a blue back alley. Now I have 2 action points, and then I can whatever like play my arsenal off a yellow, play the last card in my hand off a blue, and essentially lock up the win right there. Maybe it's just swing a claw instead of play another card, but it just allows you to use your whole hand without having to do any like janky stuff or block in a situation where if you attack you're just going to win. I think that currently this comes up enough that I actually do want to include the card. I ended up cutting it because I felt like it was probably just too niche, and it's
Was it over the
obviously
smashback or
card-
the reckless? Like which slot are we talking here, you think?
I think the smashback.
Okay.
It's obviously another 2-block. The card itself is not clearable, so there's a lot of cost to including it. It's possible that it's actually roll and you shouldn't play it. I obviously recommend testing it, but in 9 rounds, I wanted to do this twice, which doesn't sound like a lot, but you know, in 9 blitz games that are all quite short, that was enough for me to feel like I ended up wishing I actually had included the card.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think this smashback slot is interesting. I like smashback. I ended up playing it once or twice. I think there was once where I wanted it to be a 3-block. But overall, this is a good card. I think 1 back alley is worth it. Definitely don't play 2. The 1 reckless also ended up feeling good to me. I feel like it was a solid amount. You can never draw 2,
Mhm.
but there were certain spots where I was happy that I had this card remaining in my first cycle as kind of a win con to play toward.
Did it ever win a game? Because you've got 0 transforms, you've got 1 scabs. Did you get 2 reckless kills?
I did get 1 reckless.
1. Okay, 0, 1, 1. It's good enough. Good enough. You are a brute player, true and true. You've tried most of the spice that we have in our deck list. Well, cool, Brodie. That's really interesting because there is the battle hardened the ProQuest Plus at Battle Hardened Columbus coming up. That is Blitz, and I am very intrigued by the format, especially now that we know a Levia deck performed oh so well. So with those little edits, I'll do some tweaking of my own. But the last thing I want to touch on for sure is your run itself, right? Because there was no coverage of this event, and you lost 1 game in 8 rounds, including the top 8, through a field of pre-nerf Data Doll. And as we move into Blitz, especially for skirmish season or like this upcoming ProQuest, it is a bit different now. You know, Zen exists again. Data Doll got her nerf. The Little is also gone, which I honestly thought was banned anyway, so that one like kind of freaked me out. How did your tournament go? And kind of looking forward, how do you feel about Levia?
So I played against most of the relevant heroes except for Victor, because of course there were none. I also didn't play against any Enigma in the tournament, which I'm not sure how represented Enigma is going to be in Blitz, but I feel like she's, from what I hear, like a solid hero. I played against 1 Data Doll during Swiss, and I feel like this Data Doll had below average luck, a fair amount of boost cards hitting the banish zone, but I ended up winning the game quite convincingly. So I suspect that matchup is probably a bit Data Doll favored, at least pre-ban. I would want to play it more, but I think Levia has a lot of tools, mostly just like the armor and having like 1 really good fleshbag spot to mess with what Data Doll's trying to do. I think basically you're just looking for any situation where they don't already have a card in the pitch zone. Like ideally they're boosting a 0 cost and they have 1 card in hand. Almost certainly that's just a card that they want to pitch to Foundry Heart to, you know, get some looks and then swing Talishar at you. So that's just a wonderful use of Fleshbag. But all in all, I feel like Levia has no horrendous matchups. Everything is pretty close to 50-50. That's why I picked the deck. I think she's in a great spot. Whether she is the very best deck in Blitz, I would have to do a lot more testing to determine that. But I am going to Florence this weekend, and the battle-hardened is also Blitz, and I'm
sick.
planning to bring Levia to that. So that's, I played it once. If things don't go well and I don't make day 2 of the calling, I'm planning to play it again. So yeah, I think it's quite strong.
Awesome. So with that, Brodie, huge thanks for coming on the channel and being a Levia convert, and especially since you do pronounce her name correctly. Well done. The indoctrination has worked. Any last shout outs? I saw Michael in particular was also looking for Levia cards. Was he involved in this? Like, who do you want to thank?
Yeah, shout out to Michael Fang for testing Blitz with me there in Japan that week. We were in a total shortage of cards, and Xavier only had one. He basically has like one playset of the game, so he's like, well, I can give one of you a Levia deck, but not both. And Michael ended up letting me use the Levia deck and just played his own.
He's like, oh, okay, you can win the ProQuest, Brodie.
So I guess double shout out to him for being like, oh, you play the what seems like probably the better or at least more tested deck, and also just being my Blitz testing partner. And shout outs to MinMax Games, my mom, both for supporting me and being awesome, testing team the Wolfpack, everybody in the Fab community. Japan trip was really, really fun, and it was great to see friends. So yeah, it was just a great time.
Sweet. And with that, you'll see me at Battle Hardened Columbus this weekend. You'll see Brodie at Calling Florence this weekend, and we'll see you all next time. So thanks for watching.